All right, everybody, it is that time. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, especially for those of you who are rooting for one of the two major teams in the World Series. I will not be offended at all if you have that playing in the background on mute. Actually, it doesn't even have to be on mute, just so you know, and again, a couple little admin things before we get rolling here. You guys are all on mute. There are usually about 100 people on the line here, so, we wouldn't be able to do anything off of mute for you guys, but fear not, we do have a way to communicate. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the questions section the entire time tonight while we talk to Rob. So your job is, while we're doing this whole thing, if you have any questions at all, pop on over to that questions section. If you're having trouble finding that, there are a couple places you can look. There's within that dashboard, it's either going to be at the top of your screen or along in a column on the side of your screen. Some people have said that there are specific icons there, like a question mark or a check mark. I've seen that in the past. Otherwise, it's just the word questions with a little plus sign next to it to the left of it. That's how mine is, at least. You can expand it with the plus sign, type your little question in there. I will keep an eye on it. I've seen all of the ones that have come in already. Thanks for putting those in, guys. We're going to try to, I'll just interject as needed with that type of thing. And then if there are a bunch of them, I'll do a bunch at the end too, time permitting. So I'm not going to take up too much of the time in the beginning here, like I normally do. So I want to get right into this. Rob is a busy man. We want to make sure we get everything squared away with the whole topic if we can. So without much more ado, my name is Jennifer McInnes. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications for Sonoran Desert Institute. Thanks everybody who's chiming in for the first time. And again, thank you everybody who's returning. We love seeing those returning people as well. For those of you who have not done a webinar with SDI before, the format is pretty much the same every time. We're going to go over a little bit of information about SDI so that you guys know who we are, what we do, all that good stuff. We'll talk about the featured guest and then we'll get into the topic. So, who are we? We are an accredited online firearms technology college. We have a couple different programs and courses. Everything we do is firearms technology related. There are a couple general education courses within the associate degree program, but that's about it. Everything else is firearms specific. So everything is done completely online. You'll have all of your tools and materials shipped to your door. You'll access your tests and quizzes and everything using our online classroom. It's called Moodle. All of your course materials will be in there as well. And you will have a weekly schedule to adhere to, but within that week, however you learn is okay with us. If that's 2 a.m. when you get off work, that's great. If it's 6 o'clock in the morning before the kids get off to school, that's great. We want this to be accessible for anybody, no matter if that means you're working full-time or you're active duty or you've got family obligations or whatever the case may be. As far as what we offer goes, we have two kind of larger credentials. One is the Associate of Science in Firearms Technology degree. That's a 60 credit hour program there. The Advanced Gunsmithing Certificate right below it is a 32 credit hour program. Both of those are approved for use of TA and VA benefits. And the degree program, that top one there, is also approved to participate in federal student aid for eligible students. So if that is something that might make school accessible for you at this time, please feel free to let us know. We'd be happy to walk you through any information on that. Same thing goes for really anybody who'd like to discuss kind of how school might be affordable for them. So we're happy to help however we can. We do have a ballistics and reloading certificate as well. That's a non-credit course. And then 3 standalone armor courses. In fact, you can take any of our courses individually, but these are the 3 that are most often picked for that type of thing. The AR-15 Advanced Armor course, AR-10, and 1911. Now those 3 courses right there, like I said, standalone is totally fine, or you'll actually be able to pick one of them as your capstone project within the degree program or the Advanced Gunsmithing Certificate program. So if you want kind of best of both worlds, or if you want to do utilize military benefits or something like that, you would want to take those armor courses as as your capstone topic essentially for the degree program or the Advanced Gunsmithing Certificate program. We do also have, while everything is online, there are a lot of hands-on training aspects of the programs as well. And we do additionally have something called field studies that you can opt to take part of. They are no additional tuition cost to the student. So the student is responsible for travel and lodging during the time. They're on site at about 13 different locations nationwide. They have a huge partnership that we're super excited about with Taurus Holdings, which is a major, major player in the industry. That one's actually going to be our first paid field study. Very excited about that. A lot of our guys that have done field studies have gotten job offers with the places that they've done this externship at. It's amazing, amazing experience. So if that is something that you're interested in, you're eligible if you are in or have graduated from the degree program or the advanced gunsmithing certificate program. For more information, field study at sdi.edu. And for information, oh my gosh, I don't have the admissions email address on there. Roxanne Palmer, our director of admissions, is going to kill me. If you do have questions about any of our program or course offerings, email them, admissions@sdi.edu. Or check out the website. You can get all of the information there, and we'd be happy to help however we can. Okay, so Rob, I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of talk about you, where you are currently, where you came from, and then we'll get rolling into the actual development of the business. So take it away for me.
All right, thanks a lot. Hopefully this sounds really good. You'll let me know, Jennifer, if it doesn't. The association that I have with SDI is something I'm pretty proud of. I was asked a little over 2 years ago to be involved as a consultant, board of advisors member to help SDI take some big leaps forward in terms of reaching as many students as possible who are already engaged with the firearms community. And I've worked really hard. We're going to talk about that during this the business development seminar. And I've also had some really great opportunities. I've been really lucky. I've been at different times that there have been opportunities that I either had to capitalize on or I missed. And some of the ones that I was able to capitalize on, it put me in a position to talk to a lot of people inside of the firearms community, and being able to talk to them on behalf of SDI and the great opportunities, especially for our veterans that SDI offers, has been great. And one of the things that I'm very interested in doing, and it has been talked about for a while now, is taking the under the firearms technology banner and helping people to really get a more formal education in being a defensive shooting is, of course, my specialty, but in general, firearms shooting instructor, something more than just the 3-day courses that are offered by many companies and organizations, or 1 or 2 day instructor development classes that help push people who are already instructors into new areas, or the even the 2-week typical programs that are offered by most of the states in the law enforcement realm and things like that, and really just making this a much more formalized community and industry of instructors. So I got started, as most people have, by being a firearms enthusiast, by being someone who was a shooter, someone who enjoyed guns, and had friends who said, "Hey, you shoot?" "Yeah, well, I was thinking about getting a gun," or "My mom's getting a gun," or "My friend just got a gun. Maybe we can go to the range someday and you can help them learn how to shoot." Or I had people that I cared about or that I wanted to engage in the recreational endeavor of shooting at the beginning, or the sport of shooting, maybe the hunting traditions that we all share, or eventually people that I was interested in helping to be able to protect themselves, whether that was family members, friends, fellow members of police departments or security teams, people that I wanted to help improve or even just establish their defensive shooting skills. And it was really those passions that led to those opportunities to start a business around it. And I think that's important. I sent an outline, which was like 4 bullet points when I was asked to do this webinar. And the first one is one that I talk about with everyone who approaches me, and now they get the same lecture from several people inside of my organization. The organization is I.C.E. Training Company. I.C.E. Training Company has several different programs and courses that it's developed and co-developed with many of our instructor team over the last 15 years. For a long time, I operated and was known as the director of the Valhalla Training Center. I guess now it's not a long time. In retrospect, I guess as a slice of time, it was about 5 years in the mid-2000s. But it was a very important 5 years in terms of my development opportunities and sort of my influence in the firearms community. So I got started, literally teaching people in the backyard at a home range I had in Tennessee in the mid-90s. Towards the late 90s, I got formally involved with the industry. I always sort of mark my involvement with the firearms industry by my attendance of my first SHOT Show, the Shooting Hunting Outdoor Trade Show, and that was 1997. So I'll be attending my 21st SHOT Show here in just a couple months. And started writing for some of the magazines. I was very active on a lot of the forums. This is obviously before social media as we know it today, but I was an administrator on a couple forums, very active in the community then, talking about guns. My electronic communications about guns go all the way back to 300 baud modems, which I'm sure some of the people on the call will have to go Google that later. Dial-in bulletin board systems in the 80s. So I was communicating a lot. I was doing a lot with the media, a lot of marketing, a lot of promotion. I was putting together charity shooting events, and I was also a reserve officer in the very late 90s. I went to move to Virginia, became a full-time police officer, and continued to expand and jump on any opportunity that I had to teach. And the teaching stopped being just firearms and started getting into officer safety and tactics and executive protection and a lot of the other things I was doing. And what became very apparent to me by 2001 was that I enjoyed teaching, and I enjoyed empowering others, and I enjoyed helping others achieve their goals, and felt like I very much, in fact, more so than I was enjoying doing the work of a law enforcement officer, doing the work of executive protection, especially when it came to the bureaucratic work. There's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of doing really good things as far as I'm concerned at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and then being in a sergeant's or lieutenant's office explaining why you did what you did the way you did it at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And then some frustrations with, everything everybody knows about law enforcement community, frustrations with the politics, frustrations with the bureaucracy. And I was really getting a lot of satisfaction and a lot of traction and a lot of opportunities to teach. So I made the decision in the summer of 2001. I actually just posted about this in September on the anniversary of 9/11. In the summer of 2001, I made the decision to separate from full-time law enforcement and launch my career as a instructor, teaching SWAT courses, teaching officer survival courses, teaching firearms, defensive shooting courses, executive protection, kind of whatever I could do. And as we all know, just a couple months later, 9/11 happened, and the private sector security, private sector contracting, and private sector defensive shooting and firearms and related instructor community exploded with opportunities. No pun intended, of course. And then realized that we had all these opportunities to jump into, and forming relationships and forming collaborative opportunities, designing classes, both inside the public sector and inside the private sector, focusing mostly on executive protection, private security, and law enforcement officer survival. I had been on a SWAT team briefly. I had been on a hostage negotiators team. In fact, I was at a multi-jurisdictional hostage negotiator team training when the plan was on 9/11. And that's, we kind of all know where we were that day. And that's what I was doing. And what I had done when I left Virginia was I went back to Tennessee and took a temporary position with a very small police department to help them design a field training officer program. They had gotten some funding. They had expanded and annexed and had a growing population, a growing tax base. They were going to add a number of officers. And I took a position when I was building my personal business with them to help them design their field training officer program. So all this was going on in the fall of 2001, and jumped around a lot, never said no, said yes to every opportunity to try to help other people do these things better, to make myself better as an instructor, to find opportunities to learn more from other people who'd been doing this for a long time. The generation of instructors that started in the late 80s, when the private sector defensive shooting industry was really born. Of course, Jeff Cooper and Gunsight and all the guys that either were shooting with him or came through there or came out of there or were inspired there were very influential to me. Clint Smith was a guy who I consider a mentor in the early 2000s. Louis Auerbach. Over time, I got to know a lot of those guys that either were at Gunsight or who broke away from Gunsight to do their own thing. And especially that latter group was really influential to me at that time. Fast forward to 2003, I had the opportunity to move out to Colorado and become the director of training at the Valhalla Training Center. That started with me working as an adjunct for a company called Executive Security International, ESI, teaching executive protection tactics, survival, surveillance, and being part of their firearms instructor team. met the owner of the facility that we were renting for that class. And as the conversations went on, from me having an opportunity to potentially rent the building and use it for my own courses, having the opportunity to profit share with him as a partner, and then eventually become an employee, go out there and run the place. And we did some amazing things there. So from 2003 to 2008, we became most widely known, I think, for our training that we provided to military special operations teams on the Army and Navy side. We had recurring contracts with both NSW and the SF community with several different teams, especially 10th Group, because we were right out there in Colorado. And we had achieved a sole source provider relationship with them, so that we didn't even have to bid out for contracts. We had a 5-day extreme close quarters counter ambush program, which we developed internally there for them. And we put on these 5-day packages that were really some of the coolest training I've seen. And again, an incredible learning opportunity as a teacher, as a business developer, and someone who cared greatly about being involved in the global war, what's become known as the global war on terror, but from the private sector. So we did a lot of stuff that I'm really proud of during those years with the Army and the Navy. We had some Air Force special operations units come through. And of course, we're still doing a lot of work with law enforcement, still doing a lot of work with executive protection teams, and really building the brand of what became known as combat focused shooting, the approach that we take to intuitive defensive shooting and skill development. And that combat focused shooting is what lived out of the years at Valhalla Training Center. When Valhalla Training Center was shut down because of a dispute inside of the family that owned the actual building, that's when I.C.E. Training Company really came into the forefront. I.C.E. LLC had been a company I had in the background for a long time. It stood for integrity, consistency, and efficiency. And that became a DBA. I.C.E. Training Company became the brand by 2008. And that kind of gets us to where we are now. That's the brand that is known. We have hundreds of instructors that have gone through our 3-day instructor development process for defensive firearms coaches, which is our entry-level course that certifies people to teach the intro and the fundamentals of home defense, or the fundamentals of concealed carry. There's many states that accept that training to qualify for the permit, especially when it's combined with the typically state-specific legal information that goes along with it that exists outside of the curriculum developed by I.C.E. Training Company. That program is headed up by Jamie Onion, who's a career law enforcement officer and puts as much time as he possibly can into it under our banner. He's got a great team that he's developed to help him teach that around the country. He probably ran 10 or 11 of those 3-day instructor development courses around the country this year. And then we've got dozens of active combat-focused shooting instructors. We started doing instructor development for the combat-focused shooting program at the request of instructors under the Naval Special Warfare Department over there in the Navy. They had been through the end-user training, been through the extreme close quarters counter-ambush training, and they wanted to get certified to teach the CFS program. So we spun up an instructor development course kind of unexpectedly and unplanned in 2005. I never really thought I would start doing that as quickly as I did. So it's been over a decade that we've been doing formal certifications and coming up with curriculum that help people learn how to teach defensive shooting better. And of course, now we teach active shooter response. We teach the school attacker response course. We teach advanced pistol handling, carbine classes, again, the home defense class. And one of our biggest programs that spun up recently is a reality-based training instructor course that was developed specifically because of the availability now and the interest in the private sector to use things like simunitions and ATK's force-on-force round and the UTM rounds, and people interested in doing scenario training with protective gear and scripted role players and things like that. So that is a kind of 10-minute crash course on how we get here today, where it all came from, and hopefully to outline the idea that capitalizing on opportunities is really important.
Right, absolutely. And there's a question here I want to chime in with before we move into the actual importance of finding a passion part of it. Hanson has asked, how do ICE's courses compare and or contrast from other courses like Magpul Dynamics and Haley Strategic Gunsight Academy, yada, yada, yada?
You know, there are some of them. If you look at like, so Travis Haley and I have known each other for a long time. We've certainly talked about all these concepts and ideas at great length. In fact, he came out to Colorado, and just as unfortunately Valhalla was shutting down, we had put a plan in place for him to come out and sort of run our rifle training program under the Valhalla banner when he originally moved to Colorado in the mid to late 2000s. So that conversation happened, and the reason that actually was going to come about if we had kept Valhalla open was because we saw so much eye to eye, and we agreed on so much of the kind of foundational concepts and principles. If you look at something like the traditional modern technique, what a lot of people think of when they say gun sight, what I would say is certainly like taught out at front sight and taught very, very well by some great guys on some great ranges. Those kinds of programs really look very, very different from what we teach under the I.C.E training banner. So we have, one of the things I'll say when I do a defensive shooting seminar every year at the NRA convention. We'll have hundreds of people in the room. We get with a few thousand people will come through the 3 days, and I'll ask them, things like dash camera videos. Do the people in the room who are interested in defensive shooting skill development think that dash camera videos and surveillance camera videos of actual defensive shooting things are important to helping us form an opinion on how we should train and what we should be training, and maybe even what gear we select? And of course, 90+% of the room will raise their hand because those things are incredibly important. In fact, I think one of the big changes in our community, the defensive shooting instruction community, in the 90s was caused by the ubiquity of dash camera videos and the number of surveillance camera videos and the quality of surveillance camera videos of actual shootings. So, of course, most people will agree those things are incredibly important to help us figure out what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. And yet, there also are people who will tell you that, the curriculum that was developed by some of the founders of the private sector training industry in the late 80s is, gospel and unchangeable and uncorruptible, and it must be taught exactly the way it was back in the day, and that those guys were, they were the masters and the gurus, and they had figured it out. And I think that you can't hold those two opinions at the same time. I applaud and appreciate and respect the efforts of those guys. You can go back as far as you want. You can go back to Bill Jordan, you can go back to Jim Cirillo, you can go to all the gun sight instructors. I mentioned some of them earlier. But if they're still teaching, if somebody's still teaching what those guys were teaching in 1968 or 1988, or Rex Applegate 1978, you go back to these guys. If you're still teaching, if you're kneeling at their feet, you're missing the point. In no other endeavor do we do that. Doctors don't, they may say the Hippocratic Oath, but they're not using the same techniques, the medical techniques that Hippocrates used, and you wouldn't want them to, right? So in human endeavors, we stand on the shoulders of great people, and we go farther, and we see farther, we go farther, we do better things. As technology increases, as our understanding increases, we become more specialized. And again, the medical field's a great place to see that. There's no longer one doctor in the village. We now have, specialists for like the left knee, right? And there's specialists for shoulders and specialists for every organ you could have. So we're specialists as defensive shooting instructors under the I.C.E banner. Of course, I can teach, I always say if somebody's never shot trap before, I can help them break over 10 clays out of 25. If they've been shooting trap for a while, I might be able to get them to 20. But if they're shooting over 20, they're going to beat me half the time. So I need to be teaching them how to break 25 straight on the trap field. But when it comes to defensive shooting, that's really what we do. And we have evolved a great deal, even since we started teaching what was formerly called combat-focused shooting in the early 2000s. And I've certainly evolved a great deal since the mid-90s when I first started teaching. So the idea that you would still be teaching a curriculum developed in the late 80s really makes no sense to me. So there are some programs out there that we look very, very different from. There are some out there that we look very similar to. And I think one of the foundational principles for us is we have to look at what's really happening in fights. And if we're not looking at what's really happening in fights, then we aren't teaching the right thing if we're just trying to teach people how to be the best shooters they could possibly be. If we're watching competition shooters, if we're watching Olympic shooters, if we're watching someone be a marksman at Camp Perry with a handgun, and we're trying to emulate that on our range when we're talking about defending yourself inside of your bedroom, we're doing the wrong thing. So I think contextually appropriate reality-based training is what sets us apart from a lot of people, but we're certainly not the only ones doing that.
Great. Okay, so let's get into the topic. I have a couple little questions for you, probably as follow-ups at the end about I.C.E. But I would like to kind of delve into what we're going to kind of discuss tonight. So why don't you start with the first of your 4 major bullet points?
Sure. Yeah, and
kind of talk about the importance of that, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's the integrity of the business. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? If you're not doing it now, why do you want to be a firearms instructor? And again, I certainly understand that there may be people on the line who have no interest in teaching people how to use a gun to defend themselves or those that they care about. But I hold the opinion that that is the ultimate purpose of firearms ownership in the United States. You know, the Second Amendment doesn't say anything about hunting. It doesn't say anything about USPSA. It doesn't say anything about having a good time with your kids on the weekend or at the 4-H club. It talks about defense of our way of life, defense of our country, and ultimately that trickles down as the Supreme Court has upheld in recent years several times. That includes the individual right to defend ourselves and to defend those that we care about. So, as I said earlier, I found my passion was helping people prepare to do that better. You know, first in the public sector or as paid armed professionals in executive protection.
I think we lost you for just a second there. Do about 10 words back. Start from about 10 words back. Uh-oh.
Community scenario was this idea that we have in our community dramatically increased the number of concealed carry permit holders. We've dramatically increased the number of people who own guns for home defense. The number of gun owners has increased over the last couple of decades. If you look at the landscape, even the industry itself, I am currently sitting here getting ready to go to a dinner meeting after the webinar at the National Association of Sporting Goods Wholesalers show, the NASGW show. It's you know, by volume, it's probably the biggest gun show on the planet. It's where wholesalers and distributors and retailers meet up with, you know, new product launches and ammunition, firearms, everything related to the gun industry, but it's billed as the National Association of Sporting Goods Wholesalers show. And when it started, just like the SHOT Show is the shooting, hunting, outdoor trade show, when I first went to the SHOT Show, you couldn't have fully automatic guns out on the floor. Even Benchmade knives had to hide their automatic knives in a closet, which was law enforcement only. You had to show law enforcement credentials to see it. We've really come a long way in the last 20 years about not hiding the fact that guns are about defense. So I'm very passionate about teaching people how to defend themselves with guns and how to defend others, how to taking care of our armed professionals with the tactics and skill sets and techniques that we teach. And that's what drives me. If you are passionate about competition shooting and you think it's a great way for people to become familiar with firearms, and you think it's a great way for people to spend their free time, you think it requires athleticism and quick-wittedness, and it's a great sport that males and females can both compete in, we can get the kids involved, and that's your passion, and that's what you want to teach, awesome. But you have to have a reason for doing this. And there's a lot of businesses you can get into because there's an opportunity to make money. There's a lot of businesses you can get into because there's an opportunity to be the only one in your town or in your community doing it. But this is one that carries with it if you do it wrong, it's a life and death mistake. And this is one that carries a lot of political and social and public relations weight on your back. When you step out in front of people in today's world and say, I am a firearms instructor, you wear a target literally and figuratively on your back. If you screw up with your students, you could get killed. If you screw up with your students could kill themselves or kill one another. People outside the range who didn't even sign the waiver could get killed if you allow your students to screw up. And then, of course, there's all the political and social ramifications of being someone who's standing up proudly as a gun owner and advocating that others are so as well in today's community. So I think especially in this business, and double especially if you're going to be doing this for armed professionals or for people who own guns for personal defense or home defense, family defense, you have to know why you're doing this. And there was an opportunity to have a business. No one else was doing it. I think you can make a lot of money, especially in this election cycle. Like, those would all be answers that would probably get you sent home from one of my instructor development classes. Of course, there has to be a business development model in there somewhere, but you've got to be doing this for a whole bunch of right reasons, and then build a business around it. I think that's the most important part for the integrity of the business, and that's something I say to a lot of people. Get turned away from a $1,500 class slot that they're going to pay us because they don't have the right motivation, or I just don't necessarily trust their intention.
Sure, that's great. So what do they do then? What's the next step?
The next step, why? So the first question answers why. Once you can answer that question well, then you got to get started. You got to just do it, and the just do it Doesn't mean you don't go to an instructor development course. It doesn't mean you don't study the material. It doesn't mean you don't have to know what you're doing. But I know a lot of people, and I encounter a lot of people, and I've had a lot of students who come through instructor development courses or gotten their NRA certification, and then constantly come up against these, what I consider very, very leapable hurdles to their getting started, because they're waiting for, the perfect range, the perfect weather, the full class, the right partners. Maybe, people have delusions of grandeur, like they're going to have sponsored classes and all these things, or they're going to get a contract with the local police department. Or I see people who've never owned a range before, never taught a class, who want to build ranges near military facilities because they think they're going to be able to get contracts like we got in the mid 2000s teaching military personnel, or like Blackwater did in the 90s, and built a business, off of teaching firearms skills. There were a lot of other things going on than just building a big range near a mecca of the United States Navy that got Blackwater into a position where they could build what they built on firearms instruction originally. You have to take every opportunity you can to teach. And like I said, I got started teaching in a backyard range for free, teaching friends and friends of family and family of friends, and really just honing my skills as a teacher and developing my reputation as someone who knew what he was doing, was able to run a range safely, and was able to convey information that helped people, whether they just wanted to go hunting and feel like they could hit the deer, or trap shooting, or certainly defensive shooting, and then developing skill sets inside of the law enforcement and security community. So getting started, finding students and taking every opportunity you can, without the expectation that the pictures are going to look pretty on social media because the range is kind of ugly, without the expectation you're going to get paid a lot because you're probably not going to get paid anything, without the expectation that someone's going to give you a contract to do things that you haven't established a track record of being able to do. You're not going to just walk into that. If you do, something's wrong. In fact, you're probably going to get in over your head really fast. So getting started means finding students. One of the things that I'm going to kind of lead right into the next piece of this, which is building the business. Because these things are so tied together. One of the biggest frustrations I have, the new instructor who has all the potential in the world, has put a lot of money and a lot of time, a lot of passion and energy into this idea that they're going to become a firearms instructor and develop a firearms training business, who tells me that they can't get enough people for a class, or that they tell me that they had to cancel a class that they had listed because there weren't enough people that signed up. And I'll ask them, I say, how many people were there? Well, there were 2 or 3 or whatever. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. I'll do 60 classes easy this year. I just looked at my calendar before starting this. I have 16 classes left this year, and it's the holiday period, trade show period, election season, and it's supposed to be the time that and if the weather starts turning bad around the country, it's supposed to be the time that instructors that travel around like I do slow down. And that is slowing down for me. I probably, I got 60, 70 classes this year, and I still got 16 plus a couple vacations and holidays and things like that. I cram a lot of classes in. 6 to 10 of those classes won't be full. And there'll be at least a handful of them that have 5 or less people in them. Some of them are specialty classes. Again, it's the holiday season. There's a lot going on. Depending on what happens with the election, people may be spending all their money on guns and ammo, and they'll worry about it. So we have a lot of issues inside of the community that I just laugh at when someone says they had to cancel a class because there are only 2 or 3 people and they've never taught 10 classes in their life. Like, I don't know what they're waiting for. And here's the deal, and this again now rolls right into my building the business line, was no, really, you have to do this. You can't wait until your business is built to celebrate a great range and a full class. You've got to build it by teaching anybody and everybody you can. You're not going to have a better, more passionate advertisement. You're not going to have a better advocate than a satisfied customer. And that's probably true in just about every business. There's no full page ads you can buy. There's no commercial. There's no media opportunity you can get that's going to be better than just someone who can go to one of their peers and say, this person helped me, and they're worth spending time and money with. So every time you cancel a small class, every time you pass up the opportunity to spend 2 hours at the range with somebody and help them, you're missing out on the best opportunity for advertising and business building you could ever have. And I say that ad nauseum to the guys. We do an instructor development conference call just about every month. We probably do one about 10 times a year. with the combat focus shooting instructor. So anybody who's been through our combat focus shooting instructor course can jump on the conference call, and we spend about 45 minutes or an hour kind of doing updates if something's changed, or throwing something out. Hey, I had this experience with students on the range. You guys should be aware of this. Here's a safety issue. Here's a new way of explaining a concept or a new way of running a drill. We'll talk about collaborative business opportunities. And at the end of the call, we always go West Coast to East Coast, or East Coast to West Coast. Most of the instructors are here in the U.S., and we'll have them kind of give us a little update or ask questions, tell us what's going on. And they kind of have learned, the guys that are still active in the program don't really say it, but there was a time when we had grown really fast. We added a lot of instructors from, let's say, 2009 and 2012. And we were running a lot of instructor development courses in the CFS program, way more than we do now. Now we'll do 3 or 4 a year. We were doing 10 or 12 a year at one point. And we grew really fast, and we ended up with a lot of instructors that just really weren't as dedicated or committed to the process as I would like to see them be to be active inside of our program. And these were the guys that were canceling classes with 2 or 3 people, or were, waiting to get a full class, or they were trying to get the local gun range to find 10 paying students before they'd show up. And, I would every call just, berate them basically and say, I don't know what you guys are thinking. Even if you lose $500 that day between range fees and missing whatever else you're missing, if you spend $500 on 3 people who are going to go out and advocate for you in your community, and you're charging $250 a day, so be it. It costs you $1,250 to put the class on. I don't know how that's possible. The most expensive ranges, you build your target stands, whatever it is, you buy targets, you pay certificates. The certificates are going to cost you $20 per student. I don't know how you're spending $1,250 that day, but if you are, and you only took in $750 from the 3 students, and you lost $500, it's going to be the best $500 you ever spent on advertising. And
Sure.
No, you're not going to have pretty pictures to put up on social media of a full class standing there looking at you like you're a hero. But what you are going to have is more teaching experience and great advocates. So you've really got to do this. You've got to make the relationships with the ranges. You got to find the place to shoot. You got to get any student you can to the range, and then you got to teach, and you got to teach well so that you can really build your business. And if you have an opportunity to be an assistant instructor, if you have an opportunity to team teach, it's a big thing we do inside of our programs. We do a lot of mentoring. A lot of senior instructors and myself invite any of the new instructors or each other to show up at any class, run a few drills, listen to us teach, listen to each other teach, team teach, of course. Any opportunity you have to be an adjunct. And again, if you're just getting started and you can help someone, you only want to teach people who are dedicated to, personal defense and home defense, but the 4-H group is looking for qualified instructors to help kids shoot .22 caliber rifles, and you can do that safely and pleasantly with the kids and with the family environment like that, go do that. Like, do everything you can to become a better instructor, to have more experience under your belt, and to get more advocates.
I have a question here that kind of ties in with what you were just saying. If there's not a lot of demand for firearms training where we live, how could we get started and then keep the business up and running and efficient? I think maybe some individual tips and tricks, if you have any little tricks of the trade, maybe for that kind of thing.
I think there's a couple ways. There's a couple ways you can do it. First of all, if it's just firearms instruction in general, one of the things that I've seen really change a lot of minds in terms of firearms ownership and firearms, even the politics of firearms, people supporting and understanding the individual right to keep and bear arms and the interest that so many people have in keeping and bearing arms. A real paradigm shift event can be like a team building event, a fun day at the range, not a military, fantasy camp, not a explosions and burning tires, creating smoke screens on the range kind of thing, but just have a good time. Go out and shoot bowling pins, or this time of year, in about 10 days, you're going to be able to go, about 6 days, you're going to be able to go out and buy pumpkins for $1 a piece. And you go buy 50 pumpkins, take them out to your local range or where you shoot, and you invite 20 friends out, and you blow with some rifles and some handguns and some 22s, and just, people are going to like it. They're going to have a good time. Pumpkin pieces are going to fly. It's going to fertilize the range for next year, or whatever pumpkin debris does. And, maybe the range will obviously want you to clean it up, but you'll figure that part out. And you just get people out to have fun on the range. Take them trap shooting. Maybe get your friends into hunting. And once firearms ownership, if that's the level at which we're talking about, That's going to change with the experience of being out on the range. If there aren't a lot of people asking for instruction because there really just aren't that many new shooters or people who are active shooters, people who have, a gun in a closet or a gun in a safe or a gun in a box under the bed, those aren't the people that we're selling training to. It's active shooters that want to come out and get involved. So getting people involved, talking to, groups of real estate agents, talking to a law firm, talking to a restaurant staff, getting the people that who are business owners, who are influential or have groups of people that they might want to throw a great afternoon for and then, take them out for barbecue or beers afterwards, getting those people out to the range and facilitating it, really not so much as an instructor as much as like a range officer, your fun and safe tour guide out at the range, making sure people are safe, making sure people are learning what they need to participate in the sport and the activity. But creating an atmosphere of fun and excitement around guns is a great way to start, fundamentally. Now, if we're talking about personal defense, and we're talking about home defense, building that business really comes down to people acknowledging a very simple set of concepts. One, evil exists. Two, you may be visited, or people you care about may be visited by that evil. And three, you have a responsibility to be prepared to defend yourself from it. That, the police aren't going to show up. It's all the kind of cliches you hear, whether it's from the NRA or any of the pro-gun side, is that the police are too far away. When seconds count, the police are minutes away, that kind of thing. So you've got to sort of be your own bodyguard, as is said in the Personal Defense Readiness Program. You've got to be prepared to defend yourself. And that may not start with guns. And this is one of the hardest things for gun people, quote unquote, and gun enthusiasts who want to be firearms instructors to understand, is you may have to teach someone about home security. You may have to teach somebody about where they can find resources for unarmed defense. You may have to talk to people about pepper spray, electrical devices, all kinds of stuff before they're sort of ready or graduated to the point where they're open to the idea of owning a firearm and carrying it around with them or staging it in their home expressly for the purposes of defending themselves from a lethal threat. So when it comes to building a defensive training business, you may have to create, not through paranoia, not through fear mongering, but through, again, those simple concepts. It's not very likely to happen, but it could happen. And if you've got some extra time and you've got the interest, we can facilitate you being more prepared to deal with that evil if it shows up in your face or in the faces of those you're with.
Awesome. I've got a ton of really good questions here, but I want to get through that fourth bullet point. So let's do that first, and then I'll circle back to some of these. But there are a couple that are really kind of well thought out, so I do want to get back to them.
Great, yeah. And so this last one was, we started with why are you doing it? Then we said you got to just do it, and then it was no, really, you've got to do it. If you want to build this business, you've got to create the business. And now this one is, don't be afraid to change what you're doing. In order to meet your goals, in order to really develop your business, don't be afraid to change what you're doing. And this is, I think, come up once or twice in the conversation already, this idea that if you find someone who's been teaching, especially defensive shooting, for any period of time, any number of years, and you ask them, and this is a vetting question. I tell people, I say, well, if I want to vet an instructor, if I want to see if there's somebody who's worth spending my time with, what should I ask them or what should I look for? Is what's something you've changed your mind about? If you find someone who's been teaching defensive shooting for more than a couple of years and they haven't changed their mind about something, and if they're not readily able to tell you what that thing is in terms of a drill they used to run or a technique they used to use or a piece of gear they used to recommend that they no longer recommend, if someone isn't really quick with an answer on that, I think you've got one of two things. You've either got an intellectual issue where they're not capable of evolving. They're maybe not even aware that they're supposed to, and they think that what they learned in 1975 or what their uncle taught them or what they learned at class that Jeff Cooper actually taught or what they got from their law enforcement academy 10 years ago, that's what they think they should be teaching you. They're wrong. So that's a problem. And then if they're afraid to tell you, if there's an ego issue, if they have changed their mind about a lot of things, but they think that they're supposed to appear as some kind of infallible expert, well, they're wrong too, and they're probably not a great teacher, and you're probably not going to get the best experience with them. So real simple question is what have you changed your mind about? And that speaks to this idea that you have to be constantly looking for better ways to teach, for new techniques, for better gear recommendations, for better drills, for better ways of conveying the skill sets that these people want. And again, that's true in the competition world, the recreational shooting world, whatever. If your favorite technique or your favorite gun or the way you learned how to shoot is not what's best for your students today, you need to be willing to let that go. You need to be willing to either at least understand that what they need may be different from what you're doing or what you prefer to do. Being an educator is very, very different from being an enthusiast or being even an expert in some ways in terms of shooting. You need to become an expert in teaching now. And that is a transition that a lot of people have a hard time with. I'll see instructors all the time on the range who they'll be asked a question and they'll take the student's gun and they'll say, well, watch this. Or they'll just grab the student's arms or hands without any explanation for what they're doing, and they'll say, well, hold the gun like this. And that's not teaching. Demonstrating is not teaching. It may be an important part of teaching in some cases, but it really isn't teaching. And just because you can do something well doesn't necessarily mean that you can help coach others to do it well. And one of the biggest telltale signs is that you haven't evolved. You haven't changed what it is you're recommending. So going to other classes, again, mentoring, spending time with other instructors, auditing other classes, attending other classes, working with a team to push each other, to challenge each other's materials and each other's ability to convey information, watching seminars and listening to webinars like this, studying teaching, studying communications. Those are really how you're going to develop your business to the next level. It's not going to be by being a better shooter. There are plenty of people out there with we are in an era now where there are so many people on the market trying to sell classes based on their resumes. They have multiple combat tours, careers of law enforcement, high-level state, national championship shooters. And that used to be enough. If you were interested in 90 something and being an instructor and you were a national champion, you were going to fill a course. If you were interested in filling a course based on the fact that you were a cop for 10 or 15 or 20 years, you were going to fill a course. If you wanted to fill it with combat experience, remember we had a long period in the United States where there weren't a lot of combat vets for a long time that were actively, at an age where they were teaching. So all of a sudden now we've got, I've got guys inside of the combat focus shooting program who were combat vets with multiple tours in their mid-20s, got out and got certified to teach and started teaching. They're great instructors. There's a lot of guys with those resumes who are great guys, and I'll buy them a beer and I'll talk to them, and I appreciate their service and I value them as human beings. But that just because they have those resumes does not make them great teachers. And again, one of the biggest stumbling blocks is what you did in Afghanistan or what you learned from the Marine Corps probably isn't what you need to teach the guy who's going to be walking around the mall with a Glock and his kids. And if you don't understand that, you're not willing to evolve, you're not willing to develop, you're probably not going to be very successful, at least not over a long period of time.
Awesome. Okay, so let me circle back for just a second. There are a ton of them that have poured in. And guys, if we can't get to all of them tonight, Rob does have a previous engagement, so I'm keeping an eye on the time today, which I know for some of you is that's new for some of us around here on these webinars. So, okay. I'm retiring as an infantryman in the Army in a few years, looking to open my own company. What's the best way to build my resume as an instructor / bio to be understandable to my potential civilian customers? So that kind of stuck out to me as interesting because we're talking about two different verbiages, basically. How do you become relatable if you're training in something almost military related, but you're talking to civilians? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that it really kind of builds perfectly off of what I just said. And so many people have that, I think, in their heads that they are just going to magically be able to get out of the military or get out of a law enforcement career and be able to teach. And you may be able to fill classes, especially at the local level. That may be all it takes. Word of mouth at the local range. This guy was in the infantry for 12 years, and he's been overseas 7 times, and he's been in combat, and now he's going to be teaching classes. That may get you people out on the range, but as the person asking the question clearly understands, if you get out there and treat it like it's basic rifle marksmanship in the infantry, it's not going to help the people who are interested in home defense and personal defense, and your vernacular is going to potentially offend, potentially at least just confuse with all the acronyms and everything else. You really are setting yourself up for failure. So first thing you should do is really start studying what's being conveyed and what's being shared. We put out, personally, I put out a lot of information at Personal Defense Network, hundreds of free articles and videos. We've got plenty of other instructors over there. You could spend a couple of weeks, I think, every evening watching 3 or 4. Well, there's 900 videos, I think, last time I looked. So you can spend a lot of time every evening sitting down with 2 or 3 videos and just watch me or other people conveying information to the private sector. Look at the vernacular, look at the gear we're using, look at the way we're dressed on the range, the way our students are dressed on the range, and student pictures. Start finding people who are very active in the civilian self-defense training, which is probably going to be the interest of someone coming out of the military to build a business. Look at what's happening out there. Now, you're going to find plenty of classes where people are dressed in ways that you might roll your eyes at. You're going to find plenty of classes that I roll my eyes at. Guys out there wearing plate carriers and taking a home defense class. There's no denying if there is essentially money to be made. There are plenty of people who want that fantasy camp. They want to hear your war stories, and they want to be able to go tell their people that they trained with a Navy SEAL or an infantry combat vet. But that's not where my passion is, and I don't think that's where the development of the industry is best served. So seeing what people who are really catering their classes to civilians, listening to the way they talk, listening to things they're addressing, listening to the questions that those students have, because the main reason that your program and your vernacular and your techniques and your drills and your explanations and your courses will evolve is because of the students. People with military experience are familiar with the concept, the plan survives first contact with an enemy. Well, your lesson plan survives first contact with students, because the students are going to ask questions you weren't expecting. They're going to take something you thought was going to be hard and it's going to be easy for them. They're going to take something you thought was going to be easy and you're going to spend 3 times as much time as you thought you were going to have to on it. They're going to have great questions that you're not ready to answer. And with a mature program, you're eventually going to get past this really fast evolution of meeting actual students that challenge your material and having to evolve quickly and develop new things to actually meet their needs. Well, the more time you can spend listening to the civilian instructors and involved with civilian instructors, hopefully adjuncting or attending a few classes, and then going through an instructor development course specifically aimed for the private sector, the easier that transition is going to be coming out of military or law enforcement. And it's so incredibly important, because the nature of training and teaching in the public sector, where the government pays the student to be there and the government pays you to be there, and it's sort of like you're stuck whether you like it or not, is completely different when you have someone who's giving up a nice weekend where they could be fishing or hanging out with their family or sitting around watching sports. They're paying you and volunteering to be out on that range because they really value the skills, or they perceive a value in the skills they're going to get. And you owe them a lot more, quite honestly. You owe them real answers to their questions, not this is how we do it in the Army, son. You owe them real answers and real explanations, and you're going to have to cater to their interests, not necessarily their interests without need. I will say that. Again, if they just want a fantasy camp class, I don't do that. I do fun with guns, but it's not in my classes. If you want a home defense class and you show up with a plate carrier and a 308 scoped rifle, I'm going to make fun of you. And then I'm going to hand you an AR from the back of my truck, tell you to go douse ground the plate carrier, put 2 magazines in your back pocket, and let's talk about defending yourself inside your home at 2 o'clock in the morning without your kit. So being ready to evolve and seeing what's going on and spending time in the private sector is going to be important for anybody who wants to be successful. And obviously you come in with a great advantage. You come in with the resume. You've just got to make sure that you can take your experiences in the military service and then make them of use to people who are not in the military service.
Sure. Good. In the YouTube era, how important, we talked about videos for a second there, so I wanted to pop this one in. How important is putting video clips online or having my own channel?
I think, here's one of the ways I answer this. If someone asks me, hey, I'm thinking about taking courses with a local instructor, and they say any course is good, take every opportunity you can to train, even if you only learn one thing, it was worth it. You hear a lot of these cliches, again, coming out of environments where people are told to go take a class and they really don't have a choice. And when you put them in the private sector, they really don't hold water. It's not true that if you spend $500 in tuition and $600 in ammunition and you have to travel to the class and you miss 2 days with your family and you put in a lot of hard work over 2 days, you better learn more than one thing in terms of defensive shooting, as far as I'm concerned. Certainly for many of my guys, you better learn more than one thing. So I tell people that if you've got an instructor who's charging more than $150 a day, and you can't go see articles that he's written, even if it's on his own blog, if you can't see videos that he's posted, if you don't see class pictures or a website that thoroughly explains his methodology or his concepts or her principles or her foundational approach to the type of training you want to do, something's wrong. Now, if you have a local instructor who's teaching, a class for 6 hours for $50 or, $100 a day for a defensive rifle class, that person may be developing their business and developing their communication skills and building their kind of like I said earlier, if you're teaching 2 people and you're losing money to do it, you're probably not spending a lot of money on your website either. You probably don't have the opportunity to spend a lot of free time developing your YouTube channel. So you may just not be at that point in your career. But if you are charging $250 a day, if you are charging, $200+ a day, and you're running multi-day classes, you should have a presence in the social media or online somewhere where people can understand what it is you teach, what makes you different, what makes you worth their money. You're asking for a lot of money. You're asking for a lot of time. You're asking for a lot from them, again, in a life and death environment. So yes, you should be able to convey that information. It's too easy. I remember the days when we had to have lighting and video and an audio, and then we had to put it together in an editor, and then we had to, spend time in the post-production, and then we had to upload it. Nowadays, I can do more with my iPhone 7 than I could with $5,000 worth of equipment
Right.
when I first started doing DVDs in 2005. So you really don't have an excuse. It's too easy and it's free. It takes your time and your effort. If you can talk to people, learn how to talk to a camera or learn how to talk to a microphone, and put out some information so people can understand why they should spend money with you. It's actually part of my business mantra is put out good information and money will show up. Things like this free webinar, people will say, oh, well, this is instructor development stuff. How can you be putting out this valuable information? You should be charging, $9.95 for people to call in. I completely disagree. Again, we charge a fair amount for our courses, and we put out a lot of instructor development information. There's books, there's DVDs, there's all kinds of ways for people who hear good things from me tonight to generate revenue for my team and my company and for me if what we put out is good. And I really advise all of you to have that attitude. If you put out good YouTube videos, if you put out good blog articles, approach me. If you teach and you want to put out an article at Personal Defense Network, send me an email, rob@ICEtraining.us or editor@personaldefensenetwork.com. Find me on social media. Maybe I'll publish your article, and maybe I'll pay for it. There's opportunities out there to get your information out if your information is good and if you can communicate it well. And if your information isn't good and you can't communicate it well, then put out a bad YouTube video so people know not to spend money with you and our industry will be better.
Right. Nice. Okay, so I know we're running up on almost end of game time here. There are a couple questions. We may just need to do a follow-up at some point, a couple months down the road.
We did. Let's do another 5 or 10 minutes and see if we can get a couple more questions.
Okay. There were a couple questions surrounding whether or not maybe starting with doing concealed carry classes would be a good way to go as you're getting your feet wet. Do you want to discuss that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. They're really in most of the markets, the market's pretty saturated and there isn't a lot of money to be made, but getting experience teaching people a class that they sort of perceive as a need, right? So when people train with me, I don't do concealed carry permit classes, but there was a time when even back in the Valhalla days, when Colorado changed to a shall issue state, and people were it wasn't going to be broken up county by county anymore as far as the permitting system, but in each county, each sheriff got to who was an acceptable teacher, right? There wasn't really an established curriculum, but each county sheriff's office got to decide whose classes they would accept as training for concealed carry permits. So we'd get the call all the time like, hey, you guys do concealed carry permit class? You do classes that qualify for concealed carry permits? Well, the answer technically was yes, but we weren't doing the $50 4-hour class that some other guy was doing down at the dirt berm range. We were doing we'll give you 3 days of training and you'll really be ready.
Sure.
And that was sort of our position at the time. Now, if the huge explosion of concealed carry permit interest and shall issue state law changes had happened when I was first getting started in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was really just kind of hitting a peak in the mid 2000s. But if it had happened 5 or 6 years earlier, I probably would have taught a lot of those $50 classes just to, again, help get the students through. So concealed carry permit classes, whether you go through, one of my certifying classes, you go through the NRA, basic pistol instructor 3-day class or whatever. In Texas, there's a very specific course for people down there to take so they can teach the state course. Whatever you have to do to get qualified to teach concealed carry permits, if you're just building your business, don't expect to make a lot of money on it, but you absolutely can get your reputation out there. You can develop a core group of students and alumni who will speak well of you. You can provide a lot of value. You can do a lot of good for your community by teaching a good quality concealed carry permit class, establish relationships with ranges, establish shops. It's a great way to get your foot in the door, but it's probably not, at this point in most markets, it's not going to build your business financially, but it can really help you build your skills as an instructor and help build your reputation so that you can then be adding the more advanced classes and more specific classes afterwards to develop the business model better.
Okay, and how about what are your thoughts on becoming an NRA instructor?
Yeah, the NRA is the biggest name in the game for sure. There are just about every state accepts the NRA basic pistol course towards qualification for concealed carry permits. It's a very different type of training than what I provide. In some places, it's going to be your only and best option to get started as a concealed carry permit instructor. But I will say this, I personally, politically, I'm a fan of the constitutional carry approach, right? If you can legally own a gun, you should be able to legally carry it for defense of yourself and others. But as an instructor, of course, and as someone who's a training business owner, that sometimes seems counterintuitive. But I believe that if we stop putting out very, very low quality classes, and if we stop putting out very, very minimal skill classes and telling people, here's your permit, here's your card, here's your piece of paper from the government that says you are now qualified, we would actually get more people who are doing real and appropriate training for defensive firearms use and carrying a gun in public. Because by giving people that card, it's kind of like giving that 16-year-old their driver's license. Well, we know that 16-year-old is going to go out and make a whole bunch of mistakes driving and possibly even get seriously injured or seriously injured other people and do a lot of damage to their car while they actually learn how to drive, because the driver permitting process teaches you the rules of the road and you go through some choreographed test, but you don't really learn how to apply those skills in the real world. And so that new concealed carry permit owner that in some cases hasn't even fired a shot and certainly hasn't done anything dynamic under any state-approved program or the NRA Basic Pistol Program that I'm aware of, they're not really, in my opinion, prepared. And I would much rather the government got out of our way and let us as a community push people to train more realistically. And unfortunately, any program that gives someone a concealed carry permit and hasn't had them practice and train and then practice to pull a gun from a holster to a shot and fire a multiple shot string of rounds into a chest-sized target at 10 to 15 feet, if we haven't at least met that level, I don't believe we properly prepared these people, and the NRA Basic Pistol class doesn't do that. So while it's a great class from a business development standpoint, let's go back to our first question. Why are we doing this? And if we're doing this for the right reasons in terms of personal defense, I think that there are definitely better programs out there to actually teach someone the skills that they need. So from a business development standpoint, it's a really good idea in many markets. From being the best teacher for defensive shooting position that you can be, there are definitely better programs out there.
Okay, good. Let's do one last one, if you don't mind. And then if you could wrap up with just, I'll read off this question, and then if you could also wrap up with a couple people that ask where you're going to, next couple events are going to be. And then there was one in here about if you know any good places in a specific part of Florida. Do you have any recommendations on specific locations? Do you have partners in the area as far as finding a range for training classes and things like that?
So I would say the first thing people should do is go to combatfocusedshooting.com. If you go to combatfocusedshooting.com, you're going to see a calendar there that has all of our active instructors. You're going to see a list of instructors, probably about 40-something of them on there right now, currently in active status. They're all over the country. A couple of them are in foreign countries, but pretty much coast to coast. There's several of them in Florida, Texas, Arizona, Colorado. I'm not going to bother to go through all the states. It literally is coast to coast. Minnesota to Texas, New Hampshire, Florida, California, Washington, Oregon. We're all over the place. There are plenty of people who are affiliated also with Personal Defense Network. If you go to personaldefensenetwork.com, I run a tour. I drive from Florida up to New Hampshire and then out to the Pacific Northwest every year. I do about 30 stops, about 50 or 60 classes during the tour, and there are several other instructors who participate in those classes as well, and they're outside of the combat focused shooting program. One of the guys that I've worked with for a long time, who I hold in very high regard, who would certainly as a competitor, I guess, in some ways in terms of business, but really a great guy, Mike Sequin, Mike is all over the country. He runs the American Warrior Society, puts a lot of great information for personal defense and fitness and defensive shooting skill set. He's also got competitive shooting background as well as a public service. He's another great resource. So if you see people that are associated with Personal Defense Network, you see people that are associated with combat focus shooting, you see people that are associated with the American Warrior Society, there's a lot of great groups of instructors out there who aren't necessarily under the I.C.E. banner, but that I fully support and think would be great to spend time with. As far as locations around the country where I'm going to be teaching, I've got those 16 classes. The majority of them are at my home range in Florida. St. Augustine Ancient City Shooting Range is my home range and my home base. I'll be down there teaching in a couple weeks, going back to vote. Obviously, election coming, I guess that's a little less than a week away. I'll be back down there in Florida, or a little more than a week away. Then I'll be back in Colorado doing some classes. I am part owner in a CrossFit gym and defensive training center in Columbus, Ohio. I'll be doing a class there. Then I'll be back in Florida in December for a full week of classes. And then I'll be out in California just after the new year in Central California doing a class as well. And then sometime in the next 30 to 45 days, we'll be posting the schedule for that tour, which starts up in March. And that'll pretty much take me to almost every corner of the country. And then during the winter, I usually do a class in Arizona, a class in New Mexico, a class in Texas. I know we just posted a couple classes in Houston, and we've got a couple full classes in Austin, and we're going to be doing a class in Midland, Texas, kind of near the Dallas-Fort Worth area as well. I believe that's coming up in February. So I'll be, coast to coast, all over the place, and my people are coast to coast, and a lot of really good people coast to coast that people can find opportunities to train and mentor with. There's opportunities to take our instructor development courses and around the country as well. Jamie Onion, myself, Barrett Kendrick, a couple other guys, Alessandro Padavane, and Omari Broussard are all certified to teach at the instructor level under our programs, and they're constantly certifying people and then helping them through the mentoring process to achieve active status in our programs.
We've got a couple people that have chimed in singing your praises as well who have taken some courses too. So that's awesome. Okay, so let's end on this question because I think it's a really nice little wrap-up question, a little, kind of cumulative thing here. Rob, I'm really thankful for your words here. You've confirmed, at least for me, that I've got the right idea and attitude, but just need to quote-unquote do it. I've been skeptical hosting my first class on my own, though I've taught as an assistant many, many times. What's one suggestion, hint, tip, or words of wisdom that you could give to push a new instructor off the cliff and give them the boost to pull the trigger and just do it?
I would say this. Once you set everything in motion and you have the students on the range, don't be afraid to ignore your timeline and ignore your lesson plan. And when I say that not meaning do something reckless or dangerous. What I mean to say is do what your students need. And if you're really ready to be there, if you're comfortable thinking that you can identify what your students need and helping them to achieve those goals, it's first starting with safety, of course, and then starting with fundamental skill development. It doesn't matter if you thought you were going to be teaching, XYZ drill at 11 o'clock, or if at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, at the sun's setting this time of year and it's starting to get a little colder, you realize you're just not going to get to everything. That's okay. Give the students what they need. Use your expertise, your ability to communicate, your ability to coach, which you've honed as in instructor development classes, in your practice teaching, as an assistant instructor, maybe teaching scuba diving or teaching woodworking or something else you've taught, your communication skills that you bring to the table on the range. Be a coach, be an instructor, be a teacher. Don't worry about the lesson plan or checking some box that the students had an experience. Give them what they need. And if the students aren't satisfied at the end of the day and you need to give them your money back, you can look in the mirror and say you did what you felt like you needed to do to keep them safe and give them the skill sets that they needed at the moment. And it may not be what you hoped to get to or what they hoped you would get to, but it was the right thing to do. And that's where your integrity lies. And if you sort of, like I said, lay your head on the pillow at the end of the day with that, your business will grow. You may have to advertise a little differently. You may have to change your lesson plan, but that's okay. Make sure the students you're standing on the range with that day get what they need as safely and as efficiently and as professionally as you can deliver it, and that will help you grow your business.
Awesome. Rob, I thank you so much for your time tonight. I know you're a busy guy and you're like in the middle of an event, and I really, really appreciate you being here tonight. any last, if they need more information, contact XYZ
Social media,
person,
if you do,
anything else? Okay.
it's coming up on the end of 2016. If you're going to build a business, you're probably going to have some social media presence. I'm out there. I answer all my own social media. I deal with the Instagram and the Twitter and all the Facebooks. Personal Defense Network is a big machine. Eventually, if you send things into the editor, if you ask questions that are specifically for me, it might go through a couple of people's hands, but it will get to me. I'm going to give you my personal email address is rob@ICEtraining.us. And if you send a Facebook message through my Rob Pincus / Rob Pincus Pro, my pro page, or through my personal page at facebook.com/Rob Pincus, I will eventually get those. I think the facebook.com /Rob Pincus, they put a filter if you were not friends on Facebook. So you might want to use that Rob Pincus Pro and send me a message there, or use that email address, and I'll be happy to follow up with you guys. Or, I may very simply copy you to one of my other instructors and say, hey, thanks for asking that. Let me give you this guy who's in your area, or this guy who teaches that program. And it's usually, I promise you, it's not a blow-off answer. What it usually is that guy is doing it every day, and I don't handle that part of the business, or that guy's in your region and he can get together with you sooner, or I just don't know, because we have some guys who've developed some extreme expertise. And remember, they may have built a business like you want to build much more recently than I have, because some of the experiences and opportunities and things that I went through 15, 20 years ago may not be what you're dealing with today. So if I can introduce you to somebody who built their business in your region or in the way that you're talking about building it 2 or 3 years ago, they may be a much better resource for you than I am, because they're doing something like, or they've done something like what you want to do in a much more one-to-one kind of way.
Awesome. Very nice. Well, I thank you again for your time, and everybody who has stayed here till the bitter end, all 75 of you guys, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions for me, any webinar ideas, anything you'd like us to see or talk about, feel free to reach out to me directly, Jennifer@sdi.edu, JENNIFER@sdi.edu. We have another good one coming up in November. Keep your eyes out for that. We will be announcing that in our newsletters and our Facebook and all that good stuff. So keep an eye out. If you have any questions about the programs, again, admissions@sdi.edu. We are all happy to help. We're all part of one big happy family here. So thanks so much, everybody, for your time tonight. I hope you got some good information out of it, and we appreciate your interest. Everybody have a good night. Be safe. And Rob, thanks again. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you all very much.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Have a good night, everyone.